with mercy and grace. For all of the desperate in need of salvation, our God has the power to save. When we pray His word by faith, God's answer will ever be yes and amen. Yes and amen. His promises are yes and amen. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. His promises are yes and amen. 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 He's faithful again and again. Amen. Amen. If He's been good to you, won't you join in and sing? Join and sing. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. His promises are yes and amen. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. His promises are yes and amen. His promises I left home early, searching for something I was missing. But I wasn't really sure where to go. Felt like life had let me down a time or two. Still inside I knew there was more if I could just hold on and never doubt that you would bring me closer, closer to you, closer to you. The one who made my life complete, your heart and ways I'll always seek. It's true, it's all for you. You brought me to my destiny. With love I give the best of me to you. I know that I'm a better person.
Let Divine Cupcakes and more cater your next special occasion. We specialize in decadent custom cakes, cupcakes, and cake pops. Every batch baked fresh from scratch and priced to suit your budget. Your cupcakes will be divinely delicious. Contact us at divinecupcakesandmore@gmail.com. That's divinecupcakesandmore@gmail.com. Or find us on Instagram or Facebook at Divine Cupcakes and More.
SPR Live FM.
The music he wrote about them turned him into an award-winning artist and caught the attention of Disney, the Pacific Islander behind Moana's smash hit songs on Outlook.
Now we return to OS here on the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Hello there, welcome to OS from the BBC. I'm Luke Jones. We're live in the middle of our Central London newsroom, as we are every weekday, bringing you the biggest global stories as they happen. One of the past couple of hours is about the Mexican drug lord, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. We were getting pictures into this newsroom a little bit earlier from outside the court because he has been jailed for life, plus 30 years. He was said to be the biggest supplier of drugs to the US. The case has given incredible insight into some of the extraordinary extreme violence that went on. We'll talk a bit more about him and his crimes in this next hour. We're also going to be talking again to people in Sudan. We got the news earlier today that a power-sharing deal has been agreed, or part of one, after talks which went through the night. We've been following this unrest and the protests on OS for months. We'll bring you a sense of what people are saying about all of that now.
Hello, I'm Marianne Marshall with the BBC News. A court in New York has found Mexico's most notorious drugs baron, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, guilty of running a criminal enterprise that smuggled tons of drugs into the US. He was sentenced to life in jail. During an 11-week trial, the court heard shocking details of his brutality. Nada Tawfiq was there.
Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, dressed in a suit and tie, spoke before he was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison. The notorious leader of the Sinaloa cartel complained about the conditions of his solitary confinement, calling it psychological, emotional, and mental torture. He also told the courtroom that there had been no justice in his case. Prosecutors slammed Guzman for showing no remorse for his victims who he brutally murdered, or for the misery and addiction he created by trafficking hundreds of tons of drugs into the United States.
The International Court of Justice has ordered Pakistan to review the death penalty given to a former Indian Navy officer who was convicted of being a spy. Sekunda Kamani reports from Islamabad.
The Kulbhushan Yadav story is a murky one, with practically all the key facts disputed by Pakistan and India. Pakistani authorities claim he's an Indian spy who helped separatist militant groups plan and carry out attacks inside Pakistan. After detaining him in 2016 with a passport bearing a fake Muslim name, the Pakistani military released an edited video confession of Yadav apparently admitting his crimes. India, however, says Yadav is a retired naval officer who was working privately in Iran and was abducted by Pakistan.
The World Health Organization is holding an emergency meeting in Geneva to decide whether to declare a public health emergency in eastern Congo, where Ebola has killed more than 1,600 people. The meeting was given added urgency by the discovery of a victim inside the crowded city of Goma, which is a vital East African hub. The Turkish Foreign Ministry says that an employee at the country's consulate in the city of Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan has been shot dead. Local media sources say that a civilian was also killed. Earlier, Kurdish security officials said that 2 other consulate employees died. It's not yet known who carried out the attack, but the BBC's Mark Lowen says that suspicion will fall on either the Islamic State group or the PKK Kurdish militants.
Earlier this month, IS released a video announcing the formation of a Turkey branch and directly threatening President Erdogan. So clearly there will be some feeling, some idea, some suspicion that will fall on IS. Other suspicion will fall on the PKK, the Kurdish militant group that has waged an insurgency against the Turkish state since the 1980s, and they have their base in northern Iraq, and they tend to also target Turkish representatives of the state, be they soldiers or policemen or others.
You're listening to the latest world news from the BBC. The outgoing British Prime Minister Theresa May has cautioned that compromise will be the only way to resolve the deadlock over Brexit. Mrs May said a winner-takes-all approach to politics now festered around the world, and that what she called ill words were leading to hatred and prejudice. She's due to leave her job next week after 3 years in office, having lost her parliamentary majority and failed to get her Brexit plan through. The younger brother of the man who carried out a suicide attack at a concert venue in Manchester in northern England has been extradited from Libya to Britain. British police said Hashem Abedi was arrested after his flight touched down at a London airport. Danny Shaw has more.
After many months of discussions between the UK and Libyan authorities, Hashem Abedi was handed over to British police officers this morning and escorted on a flight from Tripoli. He was arrested once the plane landed in London. The Crown Prosecution Service had previously authorised charges against Mr Abedi of murder, attempted murder and conspiracy to cause an explosion likely to endanger life. Theresa May said it was an important moment in the investigation. The Prime Minister said she hoped it was a welcome step for the loved ones of the victims.
Italian police say 19 people have been arrested in an anti-mafia operation in Sicily, targeting families with links to organised crime in New York. Searches were also carried out in the United States by the FBI. Investigators allege the families have been trying to rebuild their strength through activities including extortion and online gaming. A fugitive bear that made a daring escape from an electric pen in northern Italy is being hunted by forest rangers. The brown bear fled hours after he was snared in the Trentino region on Sunday, reportedly scaling 3 electric fences and a high barrier. Trentino's governor has given the forestry authorities permission to shoot him, saying the animal reportedly scaling 3 electric fences and a high barrier. Trentino's governor has given the forestry authorities permission to shoot him, saying the animal was dangerous. BBC News.
Hello, welcome along to OS from the BBC. I'm Luke Jones. One of the things we're talking about today is this ongoing argument between the US President, Donald Trump, and 4 congresswomen who he attacked in a series of tweets. We've been hearing from some Republicans, getting a sense of what they make of his language and whether they think he is a racist or not, as many people have accused him. We'll be getting some reaction from you. We'll also talk more about this in the next half hour of OS. We're going to start with Sudan. After months of protests, a deposed president, more protests, a brutal crackdown and broken talks, Sudan's ruling military council and opposition leaders have signed a power-sharing deal. Before we get into the details of exactly what and hasn't been agreed and just how significant it is, let's take a step back and remind ourselves of how the country reached this point.
The unrest in Sudan goes back to December 2018. That's when emergency austerity measures were imposed by President Omar Bashir's government to try to prevent economic collapse. Demonstrations began over living standards in the east of the country, and the anger soon spread to the capital, Khartoum. They were organised by the Sudanese Professionals Association, made up of doctors, health workers and lawyers. But the participants themselves came from all walks of life, with many young people and women at the forefront. The movement reached a climax on the 6th of April, when demonstrators occupied the square in front of the military's headquarters. After 30 years in power, they wanted the army to force President Bashir out. 5 days later, the military announced that the president had been overthrown. A council of generals assumed power. They're known as the Transitional Military Council, or TMC, and they're in place, they say, to ensure order and security. But the army is not a unified force in Sudan. Paramilitary organisations and various Islamist militias hold some influence. So since Omar Bashir's overthrow, the military and pro-democracy movement have been locked in a struggle for power that has led to further mass protests. And some of the worst violence was seen on June the 3rd. It's on this day that the movement accuses government forces of killing more than 100 protesters during a sit-in against the military. In response, the TMC expressed sorrow for the way events escalated, saying that the operation had targeted people they call troublemakers and petty criminals. Only a few weeks later, and despite severe restrictions to internet access, tens of thousands of protesters returned to the streets to stage the biggest demonstration since Omar Bashir's overthrow. This has, in turn, forced the military to resume talks on a power-sharing government.
So after those talks, what has actually been agreed? The BBC's Ferdinand Amondi is covering the story for us from Nairobi.
Well, this is more of a political agreement. The two parties have come together to agree to work together to form a transitional government over the next 3 years. They have agreed to form a Supreme Council that will have 5 members of the military and 5 members of civilians that will be headed by a Prime Minister who will be decided by a constitutional agreement to be signed on Friday. They have also agreed that it is the opposition that will form a cabinet, and the third thing that was agreed on is to form a commission of inquiry to look at the atrocities committed on civilians ever since the ouster of President Omar el-Bashir on the 11th of April up to now, and particularly the killings that happened on June 3rd during a sit-in against the traditional government, where more than 100 protesters were killed by people said to be government forces.
And in terms of what is still to be agreed, what is going to happen at a later date, what's that?
Yes, well, they may have agreed to form a transitional government, but the finer details which should now be embedded in law is what is still remains to be contentious. They have not yet, for instance, told us what powers will the cabinet have and what powers will the transitional government have. The other issue that also delayed the proper signing of the legal documents is the question of immunity. The opposition said that the military government asked for absolute immunity from its leaders, one of whom signed the agreement today and is the leader of the forces that are accused of killing more than 100 people on June 3rd. And the public has made it very clear that if any sort of immunity is signed, then they will go back to the streets. And this is why many people see this as, in as much as there may be an agreement, it is still hanging in the balance until there's a formal signing. And even then, people will have to look at the issue of immunity and whether it works for both parties.
And throughout all of this, we were hearing from people inside Sudan, sometimes quite tricky because of that internet blackout, but we've got back in touch with some of those people who we heard from to see what they make of this new twist in what's happening. Let's hear a first one.
Hello, it's Sarah Hamad from Khartoum, Sudan. These documents contain some suspicious points in my point of view. I will provide some examples. It is stated that the percentage of the Legislative Council can be changed by the TMC. That is concerning. Also, regarding the investigation committee point, we wanted an international investigation to take place on the massacre and all the violations that have been committed by the TMC, rather than a local investigation committee, because the latter one is not trusted and may face intentional troubles and traps arranged by the accused TMC. Above that, we are concerned about the constitutional document. We look forward to see how it will settle. The overall results are not quite satisfactory and are below the sacrifices that the Sudanese people have provided. The TMC is not trusted since, till yesterday, the day of the agreement, the RFC forces, which belongs to the TMC and known as the Janjaweed forces, were pursuing their crimes against the innocent citizens. The TMC is well known of its crimes, so we won't stop our demonstrations till we see the civilian government functioning. Till that time, the uprising is ongoing. Thank you.
And Ferdinand, we were hearing there many misgivings. Of course, the military council said this is an historic moment, but there are lots of people worried about how this will play out.
Absolutely. As they say, the devil is in the details. So while they may have agreed, is it a document that is agreeable to the people? And that is why the opposition is very, very concerned about the details of what will be the constitutional agreement. If they agree to an amnesty, because people are asking, will the military agree to sign a document that could potentially lead some of them to be prosecuted or behind bars? And if the opposition then signs to give them that amnesty, and they do have the support of the people based on the fact that they are going to send those people to face justice, then they might lose the support of the public. So the public is very adamant that they want a full civilian rule. The agreement right now is 50-50. The Supreme Council that has been formed will be led by the military for 21 months, and then the last 18 by a civilian leader, and then a general election hopefully in 3 years. But this will not happen if that constitutional document that is due perhaps on Friday is not signed and is one that is agreeable to the general public, who are the reason behind all this upheaval and the changes that are being made in Sudan at the moment.
Now, something which has started trending in the US, El Chapo. That's because the Mexican drug kingpin, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, has been sentenced on drug conspiracy charges following a 3-month trial. Speaking outside of court, Angel Melendez from the US Department of Homeland Security said that it was decades of hard work and heroics by special agents, prosecutors and detectives which had brought justice for Guzman's many victims.
This sentence today finally separates the myth of El Chapo from the man Joaquin Guzman. And for the man, it is the end of the line, and it is a reality that he will not be able to escape.
Also outside of court is the BBC's Nada Tawfiq. Welcome along to OS, Nada. What is the sentence exactly?
Well, when he was found guilty on 10 drug-related offenses, including money laundering, drug trafficking, a mandatory sentence was life in prison. And so he's been handed life plus 30 years in prison, those 30 years for several firearm charges. And he has been ordered to forfeit $12.7 billion that he earned as the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. The big question, of course, is how prosecutors will actually be able to get that $12.7 billion.
And outside of court, many people were talking, including some of his lawyers, and they were very critical of the whole process.
Yeah, this has been an interesting back and forth. They tried to call for a retrial, actually, before this sentencing hearing because one outlet, Vice News, had actually interviewed a person who they say was a juror. Remember, the jurors were sequestered. They were anonymous, but Vice News said that they did speak to one who said that jurors during this trial were reading news reports, and some of those news reports actually included evidence which jurors were never supposed to see. Not evidence, I should say, but allegations that jurors were never supposed to see. And so defense attorneys argued that because of that, there should be a new trial. The judge found, though, that there was such an overwhelming amount of evidence, and the allegations the jurors, if they had in fact seen, wouldn't have really made a substantial difference in this case. There were more than 50 witnesses, including El Chapo's closest associates, his drug suppliers. They had an overwhelming amount of evidence, and so that's why prosecutors here and the judge saying that this was a very just trial.
And in terms of the evidence put forward by prosecutors and some of the things we heard in court, it was a shocking look into that world, was it not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was the biggest trial ever for narcotics crimes, and there is still so much fascination with how these cartels are able to operate and consolidate so much power, essentially helping to fuel the drug epidemic we're seeing in this country. And we heard through this trial how El Chapo Guzman used a combination of bribing high officials in Mexico, a very organized network of suppliers and officials to help him, as well as used vicious violence, murdering anyone who crossed him, anyone who got in his way. And he did that, as a small, growing up as a poor farmer in the Sierra Madre Mountains, to becoming one of the most notorious drug lords with billions of dollars, private jets, submarines, his own private zoo, a massive amount of power.
Nada Tawfiq reporting for us live outside of the court there in New York. Thank you very much. Listening to OS from the BBC. Here are some of the stories which journalists in this newsroom are working on. A Wonka bar and golden ticket from the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory has sold at auction for more than $18,500. The chocolate bar, which is actually made of cardboard, quite disappointingly, originally belonged to the actress Julie Dawn Cole, who played the spoilt Veruca Salt in the movie. Women can be assured that menstrual cups are as leak-proof as tampons and pads, say researchers who have carried out the first large scientific review of sanitary products. The work, published in the Lancet Public Health Journal, looked at 43 studies involving 3,300 women and girls living in rich and poor countries. Although they have been gaining in popularity, the review found awareness of menstrual cups among women is relatively low. And an Australian man is trying to find the author of a message in a bottle he's found 50 years after it was dropped into the ocean. The message was signed by Paul Gilmore, who described
Jump up, free up, bet up, no standing up. Love, passion, pride, culture, I'm a 45, yeah. Music, pageants and so much more. Love, fashion, pride, culture, I'm a party fight.
Join us from July 25th to August 6th for the Caribbean's greatest summer line. It's Culturama 45.
Love, passion, pride, culture, I'm a party fight. Love, passion, pride, culture, I'm a party fight. Love, passion, pride, culture, I'm a party fight. Love, passion, pride, culture, I'm a party fight.
Special Olympics. So these are the disciplines we would be looking at. These children would have participated in various, I think I did not mention football. They would have participated in these disciplines during the whole school year. And so now it is a crowning moment for these athletes as they realize their dreams at an early stage, and we expect that they would use this as a foundation to greater things in the years to come. So we want you to just stay in tune as to what is going on in terms of these athletes. And let me take this opportunity as well to also inform the general public of the annual which would be from Monday the 22nd to the 26th of July. We are looking at the following disciplines: football, cricket, netball, track and field, handball, golf. Except for track and field, all the other activities will be taking place at Warner Park. To register is only $30. You have until Thursday of this week. That would be the final day of registration. The camp is from 9 to 12:30 daily. So we expect you to send out your children somewhere to be. The theme is promoting a healthy lifestyle for sports. So we expect that you will be sending out your children. This is summer, they're on vacation, so the sports department is a place where you can ensure that your children will be in good hands. So we appeal to the general public to send out the children to participate. So these are the two major activities which will be taking place at the sports department during the next few days. So we expect to see you there.
Director of Sports, Anthony Welsher. We now go to netball in Jamaica's Marvia Bernard, president of the America's Federation of Netball Associations, AFNA, said a major goal is to bring the sport to the doorsteps of more countries in the region. Bernard said the organization is trying to have a place at the 2022 Central American and Caribbean Games in Panama, and creating a snowball effect by attracting new members are two avenues being explored. We want to get netball into the 2022 CAC Games. We are almost there. Our next move is to lobby in person at the General Assembly in October. We want to grow the number of members in the region. We are going to target Spanish-speaking countries. We want to get back members like the Bahamas. And we are happy that Haiti is a new member, Bernard told the Jamaica Observer. Netball is played in multi-purpose games in Africa and Asia, but it is not played in the Caribbean. We want to give ourselves a fighting chance of doing this new thing, so we are working very hard, she explained. Countries in the Americas have not been able to crack the dominance that top-rank Australia, New Zealand, and to a lesser extent England have a hand in netball. Over the past 2 decades, only Jamaica have had a podium finish, winning bronze at the 2003 and 2007 competition. Bernard, elected as AFNA president in August last year for a 4-year term, said development at the grassroots, increasing funding, and development of coaches and umpires are key components. Our brand wants to build on what we inherited. We want to improve it. Just fix one or two things that need fixing, because everything is not broken. We are having a high school championship in St. Martin in August. We have about 8 or 9 schools interested. We will be having fundraisers, and also we'll have coaching and umpiring courses, the former Netball Jamaica president outlined. We now go to cricket, and concussion substitutes are likely to be introduced to international cricket in time for the men's Ashes Test Series next month. The issue is on the agenda at the ICC annual conference currently being held in London, and the changes to playing conditions will almost certainly be approved and implemented quickly, so that all matches played in the World Test Championship will have the same safety protocols in place. Well, we now go to the World Netball Championships that are taking place in Liverpool, England, and Australia and New Zealand are set for the semi-finals of the competition.
New Zealand beat Northern Ireland, Australia beat Malawi today, and they were convincing wins, both of them. Is there any stopping them? Let's hope so, for the sake of England and South Africa. Australia were clinical on court today, so a big ask for South Africa and for England. Basically, what happens is when England plays South Africa, whoever wins will go top of the group, and that means they should get a slightly easier semi-final, because they'll be playing the second place from the other group. So it is important. Basically, they're all going to play it like it's a final.
Finally, on sports, we go to football, and one of the top teams in Europe, Bayern Munich, have a mountain of work to do this transfer window. The FC crew discussed Bayern Munich's underwhelming lack of transfer activity this summer following the departures of several key players.
Gone, Hummel's gone, Robin retired. They've spent money. Obviously, as Jules mentioned, they brought in a couple of World Cup winners, Hernandez and Pavard. A lot of money for fullbacks, though, and still a lot of work to be done.
They've got a mountain of work to be done. You know, Pavard and Hernandez are, again, like most players today, overpriced. I mean, Hernandez, 80 million plus, come on. He's not on anybody's radar of the real top clubs, in my opinion, at either right back and centre back. And that's where I'm told he plays. So, Pavard, yes, he's a really good player. But Bayern Munich's problems in the Champions League, particularly against Liverpool, where they were slow at the back, they had no strength at all to stop Liverpool in the middle of the park, and they were soft up front. They had a guy standing up there on his own in Lewandowski. So, you know, they've made two decent signings who are not worth the money that they were paid for, by the way. They were overpriced. And that's all they've done. So no wonder Neuer's agent, like all agents today, is complaining for his player.
Earlier on in the summer transfer window, we mentioned Leroy Sané. That seems to have gone quiet. But Stevie's quite right. If Bayern want to be up there with the big boys, they need to spend, and they need to spend big to bring in reinforcements.
The fact that they didn't want to put their bid higher and to go to what City wanted, which was a lot of money for Leroy Sané, but he's still a player that would improve their team by a mile as well. It was quite surprising because the money is there, it's available. You know, it was their choice not to go for the sort of 85 million euros, or a bit more than that maybe for Sané. Whether it's probably worth it, to be fair. But even in midfield, I agree with Stevie as well. They need more steel in there, and they need more players. Although Tolisso is going to come back as well from injury, but it's a very interesting project because the money is there. It's still a huge club. Fan base is amazing. The infrastructures are great, and yet, like you said, they're not really linked with any of the top players. You know, apart from in their own countries, like the team of Werner, like Kai Havertz or Julian Brandt. He even chose to go to Dortmund and not to Bayern Munich. So they have a lot of work to do there, and it's quite concerning in a way.
And that's sports. I'm Theo Clark. Have a great day today.
Join Claudia Hammond for our weekly health check.
We'll be looking at the psychology of motivation. What does the latest psychological research tell us about how we can achieve our goals and stop procrastinating?
That's all still to come, but now back to OS.
Hello there, Luke Jones here, live in the middle of the BBC's newsroom. This is OS. We're going to get you an update in a moment on the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We're going to get the view of one of the medical organisations who are involved in helping to fight it. More than 1,600 people have died from the disease, making it the second worst outbreak in history. Meanwhile, health officials are deciding whether this is now an international public health emergency. It's coming up on OS.
BBC News with Marion Marshall. One of the world's most notorious drug barons, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, has been sentenced to life in a maximum security prison by a court in New York. During an 11-week trial earlier this year, the court heard how Guzman buried a man alive and that he had a murder room at one of his safe houses. The International Court of Justice has ordered Pakistan to review the death penalty given to a former Indian Navy officer who was convicted of being a spy. Pakistan says Kulbhushan Jadhav was arrested in the restive province of Baluchistan in 2016. A year later, a military court sentenced him to death on charges of espionage and sabotage. The World Health Organization is holding an urgent meeting to decide whether to declare an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo an international public health emergency. The disease has killed more than 1,600 people in the east of the country. The Turkish Foreign Ministry says that a diplomat at the country's consulate in Iraqi Kurdistan has been shot dead. Local media sources say a civilian was also killed. It's not clear yet who carried out the attack. Ukraine has revealed that it's holding a driver accused of involvement in the shooting down of a Malaysian airliner 5 years ago today. A Russian-made missile brought down flight MH17 over rebel-held eastern Ukraine, killing everyone on board. A senior investigator in Kiev told a news conference that the man who drove the missile into Ukraine on a trailer in 2014 had been caught 2 years ago and was now serving his sentence in the country. A fugitive bear that made a daring escape from an electric pen in northern Italy is being hunted by forest rangers. The brown bear fled hours after it was snared in the Trentino region on Sunday, reportedly scaling 3 electric fences and a 4-metre-high barrier. BBC World Service News.
Hello there, welcome along to OS from the BBC. I'm Luke Jones. We're going to be talking about Ebola for the next few minutes. There's going to be a press conference soon from the World Health Organization. They are deciding whether to declare a public health emergency in this latest outbreak. In eastern Congo, Ebola has killed more than 1,600 people. The World Health Organization has also confirmed a new case of Ebola in Uganda. We can talk to Trish Newport, who's Ebola coordinator for the charity Médecins Sans Frontières, who is back in Geneva but was recently in the DRC. Welcome to OS, Trish.
Thank you very much.
So what they're talking about now in this meeting, whether to declare it a public health emergency, what kind of things are they going to be weighing up, and what could that do to the effort to try and fight Ebola if it is decided to call it a public health emergency?
So good question. What they'll be doing first is looking at the overall situation. And the overall situation of the outbreak right now is extremely concerning. So there's very little visibility over the epidemiological situation. What that means is that, for instance, last week, 30% of the new cases of Ebola had actually died in the community. They never made it to an Ebola center to get tested or to get treatment. And the longer that someone is in the community, the longer the chances that they will infect others. At the same time, last week, 38% of the new cases were not identified as contacts. What that means is they weren't identified as people at possibly having the risk of developing the disease. And what that means, that's why we get unexpected cases in Goma, like happened this week, or that happened in Ariwara, which is in northern Congo, just south of the South Sudanese border and just next to the Ugandan border, and why we had cases in Uganda in June, because we don't have a visibility over the situation and we're not able to follow all of the people that are really at risk. So this is a big concern, and these are the types of things that they'll be discussing today in the meeting.
So it sounds like an obvious decision to make, to declare it a public health emergency to help improve the kind of things that you were talking about there and trying to fight it. What are the downsides of calling it a public health emergency?
So the WHO, if they decide to call it a public health emergency, they will explain what this means, because it means different things every time one is called. But what it could mean is closing the borders so that there's no movement of people or goods across the borders. It can also mean an increase of military presence. And so all of those things have to be monitored very closely if it happens, to make sure that the population is not negatively affected and their rights are respected. But for us as MSF, it doesn't matter what you call it. It's about how you respond to it. So what we see is 1 year into the outbreak, we're not where we want to be. We see the situation is not getting any better, and so we have to change how we're responding to it so that we can have a different outcome. We need to be involving the community more. We have to have them implicated in everything that we do, and we have to build trust with them. And we have to make sure that the care for suspect cases is brought closer to the communities and into the healthcare system that people know and trust.
And you were just in the DRC. Was it difficult to do the kind of things that you're talking about there? Was that a challenge?
It's a challenge, but we're not going to get anywhere if we don't do it. So we have to face those challenges. It's an extremely complex environment with a long history of conflict and other problems that have created a lot of lack of trust from the population towards foreigners. And foreigners include people from outside that area, such as Kinshasa, or international staff, international organizations. So we have to work to rebuild that trust. And the way to rebuild that trust is to listen to the people, but to also respond to the needs that they have. People's priorities are not just about Ebola. It's also about all the other reasons that they're dying. There's a big measles outbreak right now that has killed more people than Ebola. People are dying of malaria. So we also have to consider all of those needs, because if we're not considering the needs of the population, we're not going to build the trust, and we're not going to be able to properly address the Ebola issue.
And is it just a question of tactics, or is there also a question of resources and the availability of resources as well?
I think it's a good question. As MSF, we work independently from the UN organizations, so our funding is different. There was the high-level meeting on Monday that was about Ebola in Geneva that called for more funds for the WHO, for the response, for the UN, and it's a question about making sure that we use those resources appropriately with a different strategy to be really able to address the needs that are there right now.
Thank you for that. Trish Newport, who's Ebola coordinator for the charity Médecins Sans Frontières, speaking to us from Geneva there. And we are expecting to hear that from decision from the World Health Organization just after we go off air with OS. But if you want to keep up to date with that, bbcnews.com/news, or the BBC News app as well will have full coverage there. This is OS from the BBC. Now, a couple of hours ago, the US President Donald Trump posted a tweet as the row continues between him and 4 congresswomen from the Democrats. Remember the tweets he posted aimed at them, telling them to, quote, go back to where they came from, which have been condemned as racist, including by the House of Representatives last night. This latest tweet from Donald Trump says, new poll. The Rasmussen poll, one of the most accurate in predicting the 2016 election, has just announced that Trump numbers have recently gone up by 4 points to 50%. Thank you to the vicious young socialist congresswoman, America will never buy your act. That tweet from Donald Trump. It's worth pointing out that his polling numbers have gone up by 4 points in that poll, but that organisation, but the current poll average, published by REAL2REAL Politics, puts the president's approval ratings on 44.6% at the moment. Let's talk about what the political implications of this row could be. The BBC's Nick Bryant has been talking about what's in all of this for President Trump.
He is seeking to prolong and intensify this row. It just seems to be an attempt to frame next year's presidential election. And his aim from the outset, I think, was to get Democrats to rally round these 4 congresswomen of colour who are on the left of the party, who Donald Trump is trying to portray as the face of the modern-day Democratic Party, radical, left-wing, socialistic, as he was called. And he has seemingly got his way, because he tweeted yesterday, now, and he's referring to the 4 women he attacked, now they are forever wedded to the Democratic Party. See you in 2020. Race has always been at the heart of Donald Trump's business model. He made his political name as the untitled leader of the birther movement, claiming falsely that Barack Obama wasn't born in America. When he launched his campaign in 2015 for the presidency, he did so with an attack on Mexican immigrants. He knows this appeals to his base. The question is, does it alienate moderate Republicans? Some of the Republicans who love the state of the economy but don't like the president on Twitter, and they don't like this racist attack. That's the constituency he should probably be worried about, because that was the constituency that didn't vote Republican enough in sufficient numbers ahead of last November's congressional midterm elections, and that's why the Democrats control the House, and that's why they were able to get this vote through condemning the attack on the Congresswomen.
Our correspondent Nick Bryant. Well, in the last hour here on OS, I spoke to Josh Cornett, who's in Dallas, Texas, and Justin Durham, who's in Northwest Florida. Both voted for President Trump. Here's a bit what they had to say about Donald Trump's tweets. I began by asking Josh what he made of them.
Yeah, for something to be racist, I think you would have to mention race. And the only people that have mentioned race are the fake news media. So every single week there's a pattern. Every time you turn onto these programs, they're outraged by something. And, it's obvious when someone can't debate the points on something, they instinctively cling to race.
Most Americans have ancestry outside of the US, so why did he pick on those 4 congresswomen particularly? Many people say he did because it was by race.
No, I believe he would pick on anybody that is anti-American. This has nothing to do with race. This has to do with the nation. We love our country. We don't like seeing people that, it's a privilege to live in the United States of America. We could live in the United Kingdom, but no, we were blessed.
Do you think he would make the same argument to white Congress people?
He always has. You say that all the time, that he has a history of attacking. If it's a woman, he'll say he has a history of attacking women. If it's a minority, you'll say it's a history of attacking minorities. Ask Jeb Bush. What color is Jeb Bush?
So you say...
Okay. No, I'm asking what color. What color is John McCain? What color is Hillary Clinton?
Well, may I interject? I would say I'm a black American, and so, they could tie that to race anytime they tell us to go back home. But the way I see it, as we progress through, what you want to call it, slavery and civil rights, now it's 2019, so I don't necessarily associate that with race. I haven't heard that, but if anyone ever told me that, I would think it would be because I was saying something anti-American, rather be related to my race.
I see 0% chance of any Democrat, any liberal defeating President Trump in 2020. I believe it's going to be a landslide. And
what about you? Does it make you want to vote for him more or less, or not bothered?
Seeing the media outrage makes me want to vote for him even more. That way I can see their reaction on election night.
I'll take Trump over anyone.
Justin Durham and Josh Cornett there. Your view always welcome at BBC OS on Twitter. Let's speak to Lisa Marie Savage, who is from South Carolina. Welcome to OS.
Thank you very much.
What did you make of that conversation?
I
was deeply disappointed in hearing the rhetoric. I don't appreciate the idea that it's a constant attack on our free press, and I think that they misinterpret outrage as human decency. I'm a lifelong Republican voter. I'm an educated Southern woman, and this will be the very first time that I absolutely reject anyone in my party.
Why now?
This is a bridge too far for me. The continual attacks on people, the continual attacks on the press, the continual attacks on religion, anything based on race. And, of course, as a woman, I'm offended by the constant attacks on other women.
And how is this different to, I don't know, as a candidate, Donald Trump calling for a shutdown on Muslims entering the country, or saying that there were fine people amongst the white supremacist protesters in Charlottesville? How is this worse for you?
This is worse because of the position the president holds. He's no longer a candidate playing to a primary win. He is the president of the United States of America, and as the president, he is supposed to speak on behalf of his constituents, which is the people. And he's not doing that. He's playing back as a primary voter, and frankly, I've had enough of it.
And of course, I said you were from South Carolina, but you're actually speaking to us from Washington because you've been for a meeting with your senator, Tim Scott.
Yes, I just left his office.
And were you talking to him about this?
I was thanking him for speaking out against the president's racist tweet, and then I also told him that I was leaving the Republican Party, and I was very sad, but I felt my party had been hijacked by extremists and fringe voters, and they didn't speak to my values, and I was disappointed in the lack of decency.
What did he make of that?
He said he was very sad to hear me say that, but he completely understood with my position.
And how, when you talk about your values, and you've been a Republican voter for many, many years, what kind of a Republican Party do you want to see?
I want someone who's going to address the national debt that's astounding right now. We were promised when Donald Trump ran that he was going to pay down the national debt in 8 years. Instead, it's increased. It's almost $23 trillion. And I, as a mother, am really fearful for what the economy is going to be that my children are going to inherit.
And just very briefly, do you think Donald Trump will be re-elected?
I have a fear he will, but I'm going to work diligently to see that that does not happen.
And what do you mean by that? Who do you think you will be supporting?
I will support the person who's best positioned to defeat him.
Oh, go on. Who's that?
In my opinion right now, I believe it's Joe Biden.
Thank you very much for speaking to us. Lisa Marie Savage, who's in Washington, who's just come out of a meeting with her Senator Tim Scott, talking about those tweets by Donald Trump. You're listening to OS on the BBC World Service with me, Luke Jones. We're here in the middle of our newsroom, as we are every weekday. Let's have a look at some of the other stories which journalists here are working on. It's terrible news for commuters in London. They've been told not to travel from London Waterloo during rush hour after a fire closed 9 platforms. Disruption is expected to last for the rest of the day, while the Thursday morning rush hour might also be affected. Waterloo is the busiest and largest railway station in the UK. 17 people who worked for the gambling industry in Kenya are being deported by the authorities. The government is clamping down on online sports betting, which it says is a curse on the country's youth. Gambling has become a multi-million-dollar industry in Kenya, where mobile phone technology has made placing bets very easily. And BBC Minute is reporting that in Japan it has been so cloudy that some vegetables have been struggling to grow. Because of the lack of sunlight, there is a cucumber crisis. The price of a cucumber has gone up by 70%. So, from cucumber news to the sports news with Rob Schofield. Hi, Rob.
It's that time of year again, Luke. Premier League pre-season warm-up games. Over 55,000 people watched Manchester United ease to a 4-0 win over old rivals Leeds United in what's technically a friendly. 17-year-old Mason Greenwood opened the scoring. Manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says he is in contention to start against Chelsea on the first day of the season.
he's a natural, and I don't. You know, when he takes a penalty with his right, he takes a penalty with his left. Free kicks right, free kicks left. So he's almost what you call 50-50, maybe 51-49 left-footed. And you see a talented boy there, and he's got every opportunity to make it as a Man United player.
Elsewhere in the Asia Trophy, Manchester City beat West Ham 4-1. They've broken their transfer record today, West Ham. Striker Sebastian Haller joining them from Eintracht Frankfurt for $56 million. City will play Wolves in that Asia Trophy final. They saw off Newcastle, 4-0. Steve Bruce has a lot of work to do there. Earlier, he was appointed Rafa Benitez's replacement at St James's Park. Elsewhere, England right-back Kieran Trippier has completed a $25 million move to Atletico Madrid from Tottenham. As for Arsenal, they're expected to beat Spurs to the signature of St Etienne teenage defender William Saliba. They're also working on a deal to take the Real Madrid midfielder Dani Ceballos on loan. And we mustn't forget Tunisia take on Nigeria for a bronze medal at the Africa Cup of Nations later. That's in the third place playoff. At the Netball World Cup, England have all but qualified for the semi-finals with a 72-46 point win over Trinidad and Tobago. Elsewhere in that group, Jamaica currently lead Scotland 35-22. That's in the third quarter there. And it's second place in that group, South Africa. They take on Uganda later. And finally, Australian Caleb Ewan edged a sprint finish to win his first Tour de France stage on day 11. France's Julian Alaphilippe retained the overall leader's yellow jersey, while defending champion Geraint Thomas remained second after a safe finish with the peloton.
Thanks for that, Rob. Some news now from Afghanistan. 40 health facilities in the central Wardak province have been ordered to close by Taliban militants. A little bit earlier, I spoke to Asadullah Ludan from our colleagues at BBC Afghan in Kabul. He told me what happened.
Local official in Maidan Wardak province in the west of Kabul city, and also official of Swedish committee saying that 42 health facilities shut down by the Taliban today in Maidan Wardak province. The Taliban themselves say that they shut the health facilities based on the demand of local people. Taliban spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said to the BBC that the Swedish committee was indifferent regards of their employee safety. The most recent background for the Swedish committee hospital is last week the Afghan National Security and Defense Forces attacked a hospital run by the Swedish committee in Maidan Wardak province. Number of doctors were killed in this incident, and one doctor is still disappeared. This is why the Taliban shut 42 health facilities run by the Swedish committee in Maidan Wardak province, and the Taliban is seeking an alternative NGO, according to the group, to take care of their employees.
And what have the Swedish committee said about all of this?
The Swedish committee is concerned overall, and they said in a press release that over 5,700 patients are deprived of health service in Maidan Wardak province in different departments. According to their statistic, 3,800 outpatient department patient has been deprived of health services, and also 1,100 children under 5 years of age on daily basis. They are concerned about the issue in demanding all the Taliban to reopen the hospital and the health facilities in the province. But we learned that the local official also confessed the Taliban writtenly warned the employee of Swedish committee to shut the health facilities in the province.
And could this, going forward, have an even bigger impact on people in the province? Because the Swedish committee runs other clinics. It has quite a big presence in that province.
Yeah, if this shutting down of the health facilities continue for days, it will create a big problem for the locals in Maidan Wardak province, because this is the only NGO which runs health facilities in the province, and there is no alternative recently. The Afghan Minister of Health here in in Kabul, they are saying to the BBC that they try to persuade the Taliban to allow and to reopen the hospital, but it is not clear whether it will be reopened. And also, we talked with our local reporter in Ghazni province, the neighbor province of Maidan Wardak. He said that number of serious patients were transferred to the Ghazni province hospital, which is located in the neighbor of Maidan Wardak province. But if the problem continues for more days, absolutely it will create more problem. It will have a bad impact on the patients who are, according to the Swedish committee, who are deprived of health services in the province.
Asdalaludan from BBC Afghan in Kabul. Now, you might have seen on Twitter this name trending, Louis Sita. Wanted to know who he is and why he's trending. Blair Tady from BBC Monitoring told me more.
So, Luisito Comunica, whose real name is Luis Arturo Villar-Sudek, is one of the most famous YouTubers in Mexico. Actually is the most followed YouTuber in Mexico with almost 25 million followers. A lot of his videos get over 30 million views. He produces a bunch of videos. A lot of them are world travel videos where he's traveling around the world sharing his experiences. He began in 2007 actually producing music tutorials, and now he does things like trying different foods. He went to Chernobyl, showing the situation in Venezuela and the grocery stores there. So he has loads of followers. A lot of people are really invested in his life, what he shows on social media, and also his personal life. So that includes his girlfriend.
And you mentioned his girlfriend. What is he alleged to have done, which people are now talking about online?
So social media has gone crazy in Mexico and around Latin America, specifically because he's been accused of cheating on his girlfriend. Her name is Cynthia Velasquez, better known as La Chule. She's also a YouTuber, not quite as famous, but because of her prominence with Luisito, she's gained a lot of fame. A lot of people are very invested in their relationship. They've been dating for over 4 years, and people have compared it to a Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez type relationship. So quite well known.
And how did this come to light, the accusations that he's cheated on her?
So there's another YouTube show. It's called Exponiendo Infieles, which means exposing cheaters, where essentially the host, Lisbeth, goes around to restaurants, various places, and she will take the phones of couples and go through them to see if she can expose if someone's a cheater. So in this situation, she had another YouTuber on and went through his phone, found some messages from Luisito in which he was allegedly cheating on a woman. We don't know her identity, but he allegedly had relations with this woman, which has caused a huge scandal across Latin America.
And he's denied it, and his girlfriend has been talking about it as well.
Yeah, so he hasn't actually made any comments on social media recently, but his girlfriend La Chule published an Instagram video essentially asking her followers to stop tagging her in posts about this, quit alleging that this had happened. The quote that she said in her videos is that she doubts the veracity of these statements. So she's not said if it's true or not, but she doubts the truthfulness behind these claims.
Blair Tady from BBC Monitoring. Now, after that agreement which was signed in Sudan, we've been back in touch with some of the people who we've spoken to over the past few months to find out what they make of it.
I'm Omar Jalal. I live in Khartoum, and I'm part of my neighborhood resistance committee. I believe this signing deal on the political structure of the interim period is a small step forward because it sets the structure. But we don't have a job description for the parliament or the common government. So I think this is a step forward in meaning it has cemented some basics, and the crucial part is the constitutional declaration in which it will define exactly the responsibility and liability of each government level. That is what we can call a historical moment. But for now, it is progress, and we believe we will achieve more progress during the coming days. However, we're still waiting for the final signing, which is on the declaration, on the constitutional declaration.
That's all from us. Do join us tomorrow, OS, back at the same time.
Let Divine Cupcakes and More cater your next special occasion. We specialize in decadent custom cakes, cupcakes, and cake pops. Every batch baked fresh from scratch and priced to suit your budget. Your cupcakes will be divinely delicious. Contact us at divinecupcakesandmore@gmail.com. That's divinecupcakesandmore@gmail.com. Or find us on Instagram or Facebook at Divine Cupcakes and More.
Examine how.
could work. You were singing no for me. Yeah. You have been so good to me. Oh yeah.
Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Oh, it chases me down, but still I'm found leaves tonight.
I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
My name is Michael and I'm saved by Jesus' amazing grace. So I praise him every day with all the instruments I play. It started just as a kid who banged on cans with a stick. Mama be like Michael style cause you're making me really sick. But of course I wouldn't stop. Made sure the neighbors come knock. They're like, what you think you're doing, making noise up in the block? They don't really understand. I know Jesus has a plan. As a kid I never stopped. So what makes you think I'll stop now? I was born with a great purpose, but the enemy wants to close up. Always trying to block all my shots and even all of my layups. From trials to temptations to tribulations, distracted me with this worst temporary situation. My purpose is greater, and I pray that you know that. We think will last for the night, but joy comes right in the daytime. What I rep is truth, no lie. Jesus always by your side, so when the devil tries to block you, jump up and block him right back. Oh, it chases me down, but still I'm found. Leaves the 99.
I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love.
You're looking at a soldier with a marching order just to drop bombs like North Korea. I was sent here by the Father to bring submission to the system filled with prostitution. Calling my declaration to build a holy nation. For this generation, I'ma be a motivation, a catalyst to shut the lips of all the evil governors. I'm circling around the corner just to build this brick with mortar. I'll build a tower out of Babel while you writing drabble. I'm with the crucifixion, it's realer than it's fiction. All the flex rap you talking's just a contradiction. I am castigating all the rappers that you rating. You say they 5-star, well we're all-star. With no guidance given, you've been going hiking lately. They take the path of least resistance just to get the travel. Break it down, make the pass before you get the call. Cause when your time is up, you're falling out of luck. Well, the big brothers can get this from another. Your mother taught you better. Don't ever talk to strangers, cause all they do is take your soul and leave you with the rangers. They come with much danger, that's why they do damage. The devil never wants to see you packing heavy baggage. So pick the word of God and leave a heavy rampage. The reckless love of God is searching here for you. You cannot be the one if you don't know the Son.
Have a little talk with her. Tell them all about you. Have a little talk with her. Tell them all about you. Sit down and talk to her now. Have a little talk with her. He cares what you're going through. Tell them all about you. Sit down and talk with her. Tell them all about you. He's never busy to hear your prayer. He's never busy to answer you. Have a little talk with her. Tell them all about you. Have a little talk with her. Tell them all about you. Hey, 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 hey. Go on and tell him. Go on and tell him. If you magnify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together in this house today. We're going to give God glory tonight. Is everybody ready? Here we go. Glory and honor and power belong to God. Glory and honor and power belong to God. Holy and omnipotent, you are Almighty God. Holy and omnipotent, you are Almighty God. Boundless and infinite, you deserve the highest praise. Eternal and measureless, perfect in all your ways. Eternal and measureless, perfect. You are worthy, oh my God. All creation proclaim your name today. Every nation, every tongue now say, you are good. Oh, you are worthy, oh my God. All creation proclaim. Magnificent, oh Lord, I seek your face. Great and magnificent, oh Lord, I seek your face. Worthy and unlimited, Lord, I seek your praise. Worthy and unlimited, Lord, I seek your praise. Matchless and absolute, I will do what you say. Oh, and I will do what you say. Amazing and awesome, forever you will reign. Amazing and awesome, for you are. Proclaim your holy name.
Glory to your name, Jesus.
Come on, everybody, let's shout unto the Lord. Sing for joy unto the Lord. Shout. For the Lord has come. Shout. Oh, yeah. Shout. Everybody shout, yeah. Shout. Oh, yeah. Shout. Everybody shout. For the Lord has come. Shout. For the Lord has come. Shout. Oh, shout, yeah. We praise your name. Lord, we praise your name, yeah. We give you praise, Jesus. Oh, Lord, we praise your name. Do it forever. Shout. The Lord has come. Shout. Everybody clap your hands and shout. Oh, the Lord has come. Come on, come on, come on. Shout. Shout to the Lord with the voice of triumph. Oh, yeah, shout, yeah. The Lord has come. Oh, we praise your name. Lord, we praise Lord, we give you glory. We sing praises
there's any grateful people in the house tonight that are so grateful for the goodness of God.